My husband brought the twins he had with my best friend to his family estate and introduced them as the Whitmore heirs. I stood unnoticed at the back while he praised her for giving him the family I never could. Then his mother ordered the babies taken inside, placed an envelope beside the family Bible, and asked, "Did she ever tell you who their real father was?" The church bells had barely stopped ringing when my former husband lifted the baby boy against his chest. Beneath a white tent on the lawn of the Whitmore estate, guests faced the salt marsh beyond the trees. An old family Bible rested beside a silver cradle passed through 4 generations. The baby girl slept in my former best friend's arms, wrapped in pink. Her brother wore blue. I stood at the far end of the aisle, partly hidden behind magnolia branches. No one had noticed me. Grant thanked the pastor, then looked at Becca with the smile he once saved for investors. He told everyone she had brought warmth back into his life. She had shown him what a real home felt like. Then, without saying my name, he spoke about empty rooms, missed chances, and a marriage that had never given him a family. The guests understood. So did I. The applause had just begun when his mother pushed back her chair. The scrape of wood silenced the nearest tables first, then the rest of the tent followed. Margaret did not raise her voice. She looked at the nanny. "Please take both children inside." Becca tightened her arms around the baby girl. Grant frowned. "Mother, what is this?" Margaret did not answer. She waited until the nanny carried both babies into the house. Then she walked to the front table and placed a thick envelope beside the family Bible. The sound was soft. Still, everyone heard it. She looked toward the closed doors, then turned to Becca. Her face had gone almost colorless. "She never told you who their real father was, did she?" Grant turned so slowly that the silence seemed to move with him. 6 weeks earlier, another small sound had filled a quieter room. The click of my pen closing. I had just signed the final page of our divorce agreement when my phone lit up. The photograph showed Grant standing behind Becca in a hospital suite. She held 2 newborns, one wrapped in blue, the other in pink. Both were smiling. His message said they had begun a new chapter. He hoped I could move on too. My hand went cold. I read it 3 times. Some people do not simply want to leave you. They want to watch you break, because your pain lets them believe they still have power over you. I typed 4 words. I hope the children are healthy. Less than a minute later, Grant called and asked why I was not crying. I looked at the file beside my hand. He thought my silence meant surrender. He did not know I had spent 6 weeks preparing for the day. I would no longer save him from his own choices. But to understand why, I never asked when the betrayal began. You need to know about the first sign I noticed a year earlier. It was hidden inside a number so small that most people would have ignored it. The number was $3,800. For a company bringing in millions, it looked harmless. It sat in the ledger under recruiting consulting, approved before one of Grant's business trips. Most people would have passed over it. I did not. When I met Grant, his company had 6 employees, 2 folding tables, and a landlord threatening to change the locks. He had confidence and almost no understanding of cash flow. I rebuilt the financial model. I introduced him to investors. I rewrote his presentations, then called investors when his temper damaged a deal. When payroll came up short one winter, I used part of the inheritance my parents had left me as bridge funding. Grant called it temporary. The money never came back. My name was not on the office door. I was not the chief executive, and I rarely appeared in press photographs. Over time, Grant began telling the story as if he had built everything alone. Some people do not take your money first. They take your right to be remembered as the person who created the value. Becca knew that history. We had shared an apartment after college. When my mother died, she sat beside me in the hospital until sunrise. Years later, when she needed money for an apartment deposit, I gave it to her without asking for a note. When she lost another job, I brought her into Grant's company as an operations coordinator. I told him he could trust her like family. The consulting firm had no employees. Its mailing address was a mailbox 2 blocks from Becca's apartment. The invoice had been uploaded at 11:47 from Grant's account. I checked the older entries. The same amount appeared before other trips. Each time, Becca took personal days or stopped answering messages. 2 days after the latest payment, she posted a breakfast photograph from a hotel terrace. A silver coffee pot sat beside 2 plates. She deleted it less than an hour later. I tried to give them both an innocent explanation. Maybe Grant had approved the wrong vendor. Maybe Becca had traveled with someone else. Maybe the timing meant nothing. When you love someone long enough, you do not lose the ability to recognize warning signs. You simply become skilled at explaining them in whatever way hurts the least. I saved copies of the invoice, the login record, and the deleted post. I did not call either of them. The following evening, I tried to review the same expense category again. My password no longer worked. After several attempts, a notice appeared saying my access had been restricted. That was when I understood this was no longer an accounting mistake. I did not ask why I had been locked out. The next morning, I called a lawyer and asked him to examine something I had never expected to question in 8 years of marriage. What exactly still belonged to me? Daniel listened while I explained the locked account, the consulting payments, and the records I had saved. Then he asked, "Do you want to save the marriage or protect yourself if it ends?" I looked at the folder in my lap. "I don't know." He nodded. "Then we protect you first. A marriage can be repaired later. Hidden assets are harder to recover." He told me not to confront Grant without a plan. I was not to empty joint accounts, copy restricted company data, or sign anything prepared by Grant's attorney. I could preserve statements, tax returns, investment agreements, and documents already sent to me legally. He also told me to move important conversations into writing. Facts lasted longer than promises. By then, Grant had begun calling our home cold. He said I worked too much, turned every problem into a project, and never made him feel needed. Wanting warmth was not what hurt me. What hurt was hearing him erase the truth that my work had kept that home standing. We had tried to have a child. The doctors found no clear reason we had not conceived, but after each appointment, Grant became less willing to return. Somehow, I carried both the disappointment and the blame. Becca offered advice in the gentle voice she used when she wanted criticism to sound like concern. She said I should step back from my career if I truly wanted to become a mother. For years, I had treated fertility like another problem effort could solve. I finally understood that it was not a moral test. A woman's value did not shrink because her body refused to follow someone else's plan. Daniel traced my original investment into Grant's company. Most of it came from my inheritance and was protected by an addendum to our prenuptial agreement. Then his expression changed. Several intellectual property rights and equity interests had been moved into new entities. My approval should have been required. It had never been requested. Grant might not only have been hiding an affair, he might have been preparing to remove me from the business I had helped build. After the meeting, I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel. I could not start the engine. Protecting myself did not mean I had stopped loving him. It meant I had stopped placing my future inside the promises of a man who was already lying. The next morning, a board member sent me 3 invoices. Grant had tried to hide. One involved an apartment. One involved Becca. The third carried the name of a private fertility clinic. The first invoice paid for a luxury apartment and described it as short-term housing for a visiting specialist. The second reimbursed Becca for meals and lodging on days when her calendar showed no business travel. The third was different. It was a payment to a private fertility clinic, hidden under the label Executive Wellness Consulting. An internal code on that invoice pointed to Cole Whitmore, Grant's cousin. Cole held the title of Development Advisor, though no one could name a product he had developed or a client he had advised. He drew a high salary, asked for advances, and seemed to need money every few months. Grant always protected him. He said Cole had made mistakes, but family handled family problems quietly. When I compared the dates, another pattern appeared. About a month before each clinic payment, Cole received something called a retention bonus. There was no promotion, There was no new contract. There was only more money. I did not have medical records. I did not have a diagnosis, a treatment plan, or proof of who had provided what. What I had were company invoices, approval logs, work schedules, and documents sent to me through legal channels. One file was titled Consent Revised. I did not open it. Instead, I forwarded everything to Daniel and to Helen Brooks, the independent board member who had sent me the invoices. Helen called that afternoon. She asked what I wanted the board to do about the affair. Nothing, I said. An affair is not the board's business. False invoices and investor money are. Anger makes you want to place every wrong thing a person has done into one charge. But justice only means something when you can separate what wounded you from what violated the rights of others. There were employees at that company who depended on their paychecks, health insurance, and retirement accounts. They had not chosen Grant's secrets. They should not have to finance them. That evening, I opened a kitchen cabinet and found the mug Becca had given me for my birthday. Chosen Sisters was printed across the front. For a few seconds, I held it with both hands. I did not throw it. I placed it in a cardboard box beside photographs and a scarf she had once left at my apartment. Accepting that something is over does not always require breaking it. Sometimes you simply stop giving it a place in your life. Daniel called just before midnight. The revised consent file contained a page bearing Grant's signature, but the metadata showed that the signature had been copied from an older business contract and inserted into the document. Becca's name appeared on the form. Cole's name appeared under an additional participant section, though his role had been hidden. I still did not know what Cole had done, but I knew this much. No one forges a husband's signature on fertility paperwork unless the truth inside that document is powerful enough to destroy a family. Becca had known every private fear I carried about not becoming a mother. She knew how quiet I became after each appointment. She knew which questions I avoided, and how often I blamed myself for things no doctor could explain. At first, her advice sounded kind. She said I should cut back my hours. She said Grant needed to feel useful. She said a man wanted to come home and believe someone needed him there. Then she suggested I was too independent to leave room for a marriage. Because she spoke softly, I mistook the insult for concern. Only later did I learn what she had been telling Grant. Becca told him I looked down on his abilities. She said, I stayed because of the company's shares. She claimed I never truly wanted children and was using fertility treatment to delay a decision. She told him he deserved a woman who knew how to put family first. Becca did not create Grant's insecurities. She found where they already lived, then pressed on them until he began calling the pain truth. A skilled manipulator rarely begins with a complete lie. They take a real fear, add half a truth, and repeat it until the listener remembers it as their own conclusion. Daniel found the voicemail on a company phone assigned to Becca. She had left it herself, and the device had synced it to the company archive. Her voice was low and hurried. Cole, stop calling me directly. Grant still doesn't know that part. Use the clinic portal and wait until I tell you. I listened 3 times. The first time I heard Cole's name. The second time I heard fear. The third time I heard something more important. She did not sound like a woman speaking to a lover. She sounded like someone managing an agreement. That afternoon, Margaret called me. She did not apologize for how she had treated my career. Instead, she asked which clinic Becca had used, why Cole kept coming to Chicago, and whether Grant had mentioned storing a sample. Then she asked why Becca had refused to let her follow her to the clinic's 3rd floor. I did not offer evidence. I asked what she had seen. Margaret went silent. Then she said, I saw my nephew's name where my son's name should have been. Grant was bringing Becca and the babies to Savannah for a baptism. Afterward, his parents planned to place the children in the family trust. Margaret asked whether I knew something she should hear before her husband signed those papers. I do not have enough proof to answer that, I said, but I do not think you should sign anything. That was the first night I understood. This was no longer only about my divorce. It could decide who inherited a fortune, who faced an investigation, and which story two innocent children would grow up believing about themselves. Daniel and the board's forensic specialist confirmed what the file had suggested. Grant's signature had been lifted from an older business contract. The broken ink pattern matched. The size and angle were identical. The file had been edited on a computer assigned to Becca. That same day, Cole received a payment labeled Consulting Retention Bonus. It was not proof of who the children belonged to. It was not a DNA result. It was proof of a forged signature and company money used for something Grant had never approved. That distinction mattered. I could report the financial misconduct. I could not publicly declare who had fathered two children without stronger evidence. Margaret would have to decide how she handled the family side. Grant arrived at my apartment later with his attorney. His boxes were stacked by the door. Our shared property had been listed. My investment records had been certified, and every dollar I had put into the company had been traced back to my inheritance. Grant looked at the folders. "You planned this against me." "I did not plan against you," I said. "I stopped signing my name to the consequences you created." Daniel explained the rest. My inherited capital was protected. The shares tied to that investment were subject to my legal claim. Grant could not move more assets to Becca while the divorce remained open. The questionable transactions would go to the audit committee, not become bargaining chips. For the first time, Grant understood that I knew more than he had expected. He gave me the look he used whenever facts made him feel small. "Becca gave me something you never could." I did not defend my body. I asked one question. "Did you read every document at the clinic?" He paused. Then he said Becca had handled the paperwork because he was too busy. Arrogance does more than make people underestimate others. It makes them believe they do not need to read the papers that can shape the rest of their lives. I could have told him about the donor code. I did not. An accusation made too soon could send Becca running, push Cole into hiding, drag the children into public humiliation, and weaken the audit. My silence was no longer fear. It was restraint. Grant signed after his attorney confirmed he could not take what belonged to me. At the door, he said, "I have a real family now. You have files and numbers." The door closed. My phone rang. Helen said, "Cole agreed to meet. He will talk, but only with his lawyer present, and he does not want his family hearing it from him." I looked at the baptism invitation. If Cole told the truth, Savannah would no longer be the place Grant introduced his new family. It would be where every lie collided. 3 days later, I sat across from Cole in a windowless conference room. He would not meet my eyes. Then the lawyer started the recorder and asked who had provided the sample. Cole's hands began to shake. Cole's hands began to shake. For a moment, no one spoke. He looked at his lawyer, then at the recorder. Grant was not the one who provided the sample. I did not interrupt. I let the silence make him continue. Cole admitted Becca had approached him because of his gambling debts. She told him Grant had agreed. They only needed a donor from his family, and his identity would remain private. She would clear his debts. Cole provided samples and signed papers without reading them. After the final visit, Becca told him to stop calling and wait for instructions through the portal. People imagine large deceptions are built by brilliant minds. They survive because ordinary people decide comfort matters more than truth. Becca had the plan. Cole needed money. Grant was too proud to read the paperwork. Together, they built a life on what each person chose not to question. Then Cole told us about the trust. Becca had shown him a draft of the Whitmore family trust. After the baptism, the twins would be recognized as direct heirs. Margaret and her husband would add them to the trust, and Becca would control their assets until adulthood. Cole remembered her exact words. "Once those children are in the trust, nobody can remove me from that family." There is a difference between building a future for your children and using children to purchase a future for yourself. Then Cole's phone began to vibrate. Becca was calling. With permission, Cole answered on speaker and said he was alone. Becca asked why he had ignored her messages when Cole said he wanted out. Her voice changed. She threatened to expose his gambling debts, have Grant fire him, blame him for the forged documents, and accuse him of trying to extort a woman who had just given birth. Then she said, "Grant chose me over Claire. He will choose those children over the truth. He only believes what makes him feel like a winner." The room went still. Bianca understood Grant's weakness as clearly as she had understood mine. The call was recorded with Cole's consent. He signed a notarized statement and agreed to provide payment records, messages, clinic documents, account information, and a DNA sample if legally required. His confession did not make him brave. Justice does not always arrive through courage. Sometimes it arrives through a coward who realizes silence no longer protects him. The lawyer asked who should receive the files first. "The board gets the financial records," I said. "Margaret gets the family evidence. No names or images of the children go public." I thought finding the truth had been the hardest part. The next morning, Margaret called and offered to pay for my silence. Margaret did not say she wanted to buy my silence. Women like her rarely said such things directly. Instead, she told me the Whitmore family was prepared to reimburse every expense I had incurred while gathering the documents. She suggested the family attorneys take custody of the files. The trust could be delayed, and Becca could be removed later. Grant could be told privately, after the baptism, when there were no guests nearby. Her words were polished. The meaning was not. I asked whether she intended to tell the board that company money had been used for the clinic and for Cole. Margaret said nothing. That silence answered me. "You cannot protect the family name by letting innocent employees carry the financial cost," I said. I did not threaten to expose her. I did not bargain. I told her the business records were already with the board. Copies were secured by my attorney. Cole had signed a statement with counsel present. No amount of money could make the facts disappear. For years, I had believed families who spoke constantly about honor must understand what the word meant. I was wrong. Sometimes what people call honor is only reputation, protected by the silence of those with less power. Honor requires you to admit what is wrong, even when no one else knows. Reputation only requires that no one else hear about it. Margaret had to choose between the two. I did not ask her to choose me. I asked one question. If those children grow up and learn that every adult knew the truth and agreed to hide it, what do you want them to believe about this family? The line stayed quiet. When Margaret finally spoke, her voice had changed. The children did nothing wrong. It was the first time she had spoken about them as children, not heirs. She agreed not to sign the trust until everything was verified. She would keep the babies away from any confrontation. She would meet Cole herself. She would not pay for silence, and she would leave the company investigation to the board. It was not an apology. It was not forgiveness, but it was movement. Before we ended the call, Margaret told me Grant had turned the baptism into a public event. Business leaders, retired judges, local politicians, and society reporters had been invited. He had also prepared a speech about his former marriage. "If he says what I think he plans to say," she told me, "I am not sure this can remain private." 2 days later, I flew to Savannah. I was not going there to ruin a ceremony. The board needed me to verify the records. But when I heard the story Grant had spread through town, I understood the baptism had never been only about the children. Aunt June was waiting outside the Savannah airport in an old blue sedan. She hugged me, took my bag, and asked the question no one in the Whitmore family had asked. "Have you eaten?" On the drive home, live oaks leaned over the road beneath Spanish moss. The old homes looked as I remembered them from the years I had spent trying to belong there. Back then, I believed acceptance was something I could earn by being useful and quiet. Aunt June did not ask what I planned to do at the baptism. She warmed soup, cut bread, and told me to rest. The next morning, we stopped at a small diner near the courthouse. 2 older women sat in the booth behind us, discussing Grant. One said he had endured a loveless marriage. The other said his former wife cared more about money than family. They praised Becca for giving him a warm home and 2 children. Then one said a woman who never wanted to be a mother had no right to blame her husband for finding someone else. I kept my eyes on my coffee. Their words hurt, but not because they knew me. They hurt because they did not need to know me. Grant and Becca had prepared the story long before the truth could challenge it. People often ask a woman to prove she sacrificed enough before they allow her to call herself betrayed. If she has a career, she is cold. If she depends on someone, she is weak. Either way, someone will find a reason to make a man's choices her fault. Back at the house, I told Aunt June that part of me wanted to walk onto the stage and expose everything. She folded a dish towel beside the sink. "You cannot control the story other people tell about you," she said. "But you can decide whether you trade your dignity to answer them." Then, she asked whether I wanted the truth known, or only wanted to watch them suffer. I did not answer right away. Finally, I said, "I want them to stop hurting people with the lie." That afternoon, Helen called from Chicago. The board had verified the clinic payments. Grant had ignored their questions and tried to delete access records. An emergency meeting was scheduled for the morning of the baptism. If he refused to cooperate, they would suspend his authority. Then Margaret sent one message: "Come, stay in the back until the children are taken inside." Before leaving, I read the speech Margaret had forwarded. One line stood alone. "Some people choose ambition. Becca chose family." Grant was not honoring Becca. He was preparing to humiliate me in public. The next morning, he stood beside the silver cradle and read those words. Margaret set down her teacup. I saw her hand tremble. Then she stood up. Grant stood beside the silver cradle and finished the sentence he had written about ambition and family. Just moments earlier, he had praised Becca for giving him a real home and securing the Whitmore future. The guests applauded politely. Then Margaret pushed back her chair. The scrape cut through the tent. "Take the children inside," she told the nanny. Becca tightened her hold on the baby girl. Grant frowned and asked what his mother was doing. Margaret did not raise her voice. "The children are innocent. They will not be used in this conversation." The nanny carried both babies toward the house. Only after the doors closed did Margaret place a thick envelope beside the family Bible. She looked at Grant. "Did you ever see the clinic's original consent form?" Grant said. Becca had handled the paperwork because he was busy. Margaret turned toward her. "You never told him who the biological father was, did you?" Becca's face changed. She said Margaret had never accepted her. She accused her of trying to destroy Grant's happiness. Then she blamed me, saying I had forged documents out of jealousy and used Cole's gambling problems to blackmail the family. Grant looked at his mother. "Claire gave you this, didn't she?" Margaret opened the envelope. "Claire did not forge your signature. The woman standing beside you did." She held up the forensic report. The signature on the clinic form had been copied from an old contract. The file had been edited on Becca's computer. Then company funds had paid the clinic, and Grant had never signed consent for a donor. Then Margaret played Cole's recorded statement. His voice admitted that he had provided samples, accepted money, and believed Grant had approved everything. He also admitted that he later learned Grant knew nothing and stayed silent because of debt and fear. Becca tried to interrupt. Margaret played the second recording. Becca's voice filled the tent. "Grant will choose those children over the truth." A man near the aisle lowered his glass. One trustee closed the folder in front of him. Grant's father removed his glasses and stared at the table. Truth does not always arrive like an explosion. Sometimes it is simply the moment a room full of people stops believing the same lie. Grant turned to Becca. "Was Cole the donor?" She opened her mouth. But she could not say no. That silence broke her story. Margaret looked toward the closed doors of the house. "I was wrong to treat those children as symbols of this family before treating them as children who needed protection." Grant did not answer her. He searched for someone else to blame. Then he saw me standing at the end of the aisle. His hand lifted. "You did this." I walked toward the stage. "No, Grant, I only kept a record of what you both did." As I placed my foot on the first step, Grant's phone began to ring. The caller was the chairman of the board. Grant stared at the name on his screen before answering. He tried to move away from the microphone, but the tent had gone quiet. He asked what authority the board believed it had. Then he reminded them that he had founded the company. He demanded that the emergency meeting be postponed. After that, he stopped speaking. The color left his face. When the call ended, his hand remained at his side, still holding the phone. I did not need him to explain what had happened. Helen had told me what the board would do if he refused to cooperate. His system access had been suspended. He could no longer sign contracts, approve transfers, or move company funds. An independent audit was beginning that morning. The bank had been notified about inconsistencies in the loan records, and the board would appoint an interim chief executive. Grant looked at me and began speaking quickly. He said I wanted revenge because we had never had children. He said I had destroyed a new family and used my financial knowledge to take his company. He accused me of pushing his mother into making a private matter public. I let him finish. Your affair belonged in our divorce, I said. Using company money to support this deception belongs with the board. Becca stepped forward and claimed I had stolen her medical records. I never accessed your medical records, I said. I reviewed invoices the company paid. The board's attorney confirmed the rest. The financial documents were subject to audit. The voicemail had been stored on a company device. The altered consent form had passed through the company's legal system. Cole had given his statement voluntarily, with his own lawyer present. Becca had nowhere left to place the accusation. Grant said hundreds of employees would lose their jobs if I kept pushing. Your employees are not a shield you can hide behind whenever someone asks you to take responsibility. I had asked the board not to dissolve the company. Payroll would continue. Health insurance would remain in place, executive spending would be frozen, and an interim leader would separate Grant's conduct from the people who had done nothing wrong. Power often convinces a person that an entire organization cannot survive without them. A healthy company must survive the removal of a leader who has harmed it. I no longer needed to prove that I had once saved Grant. Protecting the company from him was proof enough. He stepped down from the stage and lowered his voice. What do you want? I looked at him. Nothing from you. That answer frightened him more than any demand could have. There was nothing left for him to trade. 6 weeks later, official DNA results reached the attorneys for all 3 parties. By then, I was no longer waiting for a laboratory to tell me where my life was going. 6 weeks later, the DNA results confirmed what Cole had admitted. Grant was not the biological father. Cole was. The twins were still related to the Whitmore family, but not in the way Grant had announced. None of that belonged to the children. They had not chosen the circumstances of their birth, and they were not responsible for the lies adults built around them. Becca faced investigations for forging Grant's signature, misusing company funds, and making false statements. Her accounts were monitored, and the court restricted her control over money intended for the twins. Ulla cooperated with investigators. He turned over messages, payment records, devices, and a statement. Cooperation reduced some of his exposure, but it did not erase that he had taken money and stayed silent. The board removed Grant as chief executive. An interim leader took over. Necessary assets were sold, family contracts were canceled, and oversight was added. Most employees kept their jobs, insurance, and paychecks. Margaret created an independent trust for the twins. A professional trustee would manage their medical care, education, and needs. Grant, Becca, and Cole could not withdraw the money. Margaret told me I spent too many years asking who deserved to carry this family name. I should have asked what this family had done to deserve those children. One evening, while I was finishing the first contract for my consulting firm, Grant called from an unfamiliar number. He said the board did not understand the company. The banks no longer trusted him. The lawyers were too cautious. He reminded me that we had once been a team. He never began with an apology. He began with a problem he wanted me to solve. You do not miss your wife, Grant, I said. You miss the woman who kept rescuing you from yourself. I told him I had spent years turning his consequences into problems that could be repaired. That was no lawn. He asked whether I had ever loved him. I loved you enough to build a life with you, I said. Now I respect myself enough not to rebuild yours. Then I ended the call. For a long time, I believed freedom would come when Grant understood what he had lost. It did not. Freedom came when his regret no longer changed any decision I made. I bought back the small house my parents had left me. Helen asked me to advise the company's restructuring, and I accepted a limited role. I would help the employees, but I would not return to saving Grant. Aunt June visited with a new mug. Still standing, I placed it where Becca's chosen sister's mug had once been. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is the space where we observe, protect our future, and gather the courage to leave with our dignity intact. If you stayed with me to the end, tell me in the comments how satisfied you were with the way I handled Grant and Becca. Did I choose justice and dignity, or should I have acted differently?